Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. This video is about Ilhan Omar and the Zionist lobby. Well, Ilhan Omar, she was elected to the US House of Representatives only in November. She's the very first Muslim woman to be elected to the US Congress, the first Somali American, likewise. I believe she's actually born in Somalia. So it's surely a healthy and welcome thing that the full gamut of American diversity is now being represented in Congress, and American Muslims are only about 2% of the population. They're quite rapidly growing. So she was severely chastised by both sides of the aisle recently because of a tweet she put out, various things like, "It's all about Benjamin's baby." Benjamin, I'm not sure if that's an allusion to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of of Israel. And she was suggesting that the Zionist lobby is using money to sway American politics. And there was a hue and cry about it. So why such an outcry? Well, people were saying, oh, this is an anti-Semitic trope that she is disseminating here. Now, there are obviously anti-Semites who are anti-Zionists, but many anti-Zionists are not anti-Semitic. So, I better define my terms. A Zionist is someone who believes that there ought to be a Jewish homeland in the Middle East. It's an idea. It's been going since the late 19th century, certainly, since Theodor Herzl wrote his Der Judenstaat and the World Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. So obviously Israel was founded as a modern state in 1848, but not all Jewish people are Zionists. Some of them are indifferent to Israel or indeed against it for religious reasons, for political reasons, just saying I'm a citizen of wherever, not of Israel, that's that. And indeed many Zionists, or most Zionists actually, are not Jewish, particularly Christian fundamentalists in the United States, who for biblical reasons and other reasons, they are deeply supportive of Israel. So there are these nonsense anti-Semitic tropes going back centuries saying that the Jews are hypnotizing the world and there's Jewish evil doing all over, anything wicked in the world, it's their miscreancy and so on, which is of course for the birds. But some of what Ilhan Omar said was accurate. You say, oh, if you put "but" in the middle of a sentence, it completely negates what you already said. No, it doesn't, right? So listen, calm down, just be reasonable. So there's the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and they obviously try to influence politics. Nothing wrong with that. There are loads of these caucuses trying to convince American politicians to do that, or that, this or that, but not just in the United States. All around the world there are such caucuses. All right, fair enough, they have a point of view, they evangelize for their cause, they try and persuade people to do as they would have them do. So what else is lobbying other than trying to influence politics? It's blindingly obvious, so some people are denying something which is blatantly true. So AIPAC is not allowed to make donations as such. Its members, its individual members make donations, or companies or other organizations which are affiliated to AIPAC, they donate rather than AIPAC itself, but that's just splitting hairs. Of course donations work. Why else do people make them? You don't make them out of the kindness of your heart. These corporations which care about profits, the bottom line, they make donations usually because they're going to get something back from it. I don't think that's particularly the case with AIPAC. Companies which are making donations related to military spending or private healthcare, they're the ones who are really profit-driven. Why accept donations if it's not going to persuade you to do this or that? And all right, candidates with loads of money, they're more likely to be elected. I know Marco Rubio tried this one on gun control, saying they buy into my agenda, not me buying into their agenda, not in relation to AIPAC, in relation to the National Rifle Association, but the principle is still the same. But all right, Rubio could be correct, as that he happens to agree with the NRA. The NRA said, well, if we get this person elected, then we'll get what we want, so might as well maximize his chances of being returned. So there was this anti-Semitic trope doing the rounds for centuries, that the Jews are the wire pullers of revolution, as General Kroner would said, that there's some enormous conspiracy, and mostly it was daft, it was specious, especially when Jewish people, say in Eastern Europe, were poverty-stricken, were in the ghetto and the shtetl, and all the rest of it. And then there was the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, published in Paris about 1900, possibly written by the Tsarist secret police, that they were all malefactors, they were behind the First World War and things like that, and Communist Revolution. But there was enough of a grain of truth in some of this for then people to actually fall for it. Well, quite a few communist revolutionary leaders were Jewish. Most Jewish people weren't communists, though, but there we are. Just because something is an anti-Semitic trope does not necessarily mean it's completely wrong. I'm not saying Jewish people control the world, but do Zionists try to spread their influence all over? Yes, of course they do. Everybody does. If you have a political point of view, yes, you try to get that out. Try to get people to agree with you, and then you can implement the policies that you wish to see put into practice. So there are loads of reasons to criticize Israel, such as the illegal occupation of Palestine for decades, that the United Nations General Assembly has voted against again and again, demanded that Israel withdraw, and the wall which is built. Some is built on Palestinian land, so that's stealing. Thousands upon thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed by the IDF, Israeli Defense Force. And people say, yes, but well, if you're fighting in a built-up area, it's because Hamas and so on fight in a very built-up area. Well, that's true, partly because Gaza is the third most densely populated place in the world. Where else can Hamas fight? The Goldstone report, written by a judge who is Jewish, who is a Zionist himself, and he excoriated Israel. So he could still be fair-minded. It'd be astonishing to see an Arab Muslim write such a report, but no, the UN gave it, of all people, to a Jewish Zionist. He was still fair-minded. No praise is too high for him. He's a man of the most outstanding integrity and moral courage to do that, even though he was lambasted by some in the Judaic community saying he's a capo, as though he's a collaborator with the Nazis in the extermination camps. Absolutely vile slurs against a very great man. So the AIPAC obviously lobbies the US government to give Israel a pass, to test the limits of impunity when it comes to the massacre of Palestinian civilians. Now, in fairness, Hamas has sometimes deliberately killed Israeli civilians, which is equally detestable. Civilians should never be targeted. And AIPAC demanded the United States shift its embassy to Jerusalem, and the United States has finally done that. A country could have more than one capital. I know Israel designates Jerusalem as only capital, but South Africa's got 3 capitals, the Netherlands got 2, Bolivia's got 2, so we can say, well, we consider that to be 2, and we'll just have it in Tel Aviv, because it's less offensive to the Ishmaelite world. So AIPAC obviously tries to get its viewpoint out in the media, and is highly successful with that. If you say something that the Israelis find uncongenial in the US media, that'll be the end of your career. Look at, who was that woman, Miss Thomas, that White House correspondent for decades, and she was thrown out on her ear. So there are undisclosed donors to AIPAC. Isn't that unethical? And they're giving people free trips to Israel. Now, I'm sure Palestinians would do likewise if they could, but they just don't have the readies. So as I say, they will organise campaigns to absolutely annihilate anybody who says anything that the Israelis find disobliging. Jewish historians, such as Professor Norman Finkelstein, his career was terminated. So you're to read The Great War for Civilization by Robert Fisk, a veteran journalist who spent decades reporting the Middle East, is absolutely fluent in Arabic, visited Israel countless times, and counts many Israelis as dear friends. Now, he is more heavily critical of the Israeli government than I would be. But anyway, what he says is not outside the bounds of reason, and it's obviously very well sourced. And he says that arms companies in the United States are petrified of criticizing Israel, when he was putting it to them about civilians have been killed with their weaponry. One man said several times, please don't interpret anything I said as criticism of Israel, because he knows if he dares breathe a word against the state of Israel, then that'll be curtains for their contracts. So the Israeli lobby in the United States, they try to block arms sales to Arab lands, often successfully. Now, I don't know any other ethnic or religious minority in the United States that so successfully lobbies for legislation to help a foreign country. You might say, yeah, but what about the Christian lobby in the United States? Well, they're a majority one, but they're not trying to do something for another country, well, apart from Israel, really, saying we have to do this for Armenia, or we have to do that for Argentina, or we have to do something for Thailand. No, they're really about what's happening inside the United States. So to skew American foreign policy towards Israel, with whom the United States doesn't trade very much, and Israel does virtually nothing for the United States, haven't sent any soldiers to help the United States abroad. I know they cooperate with intelligence. So yes, AIPAC influences politics. That's what it's all about. It's absolutely undeniable. It's flagrant. I'm not saying they're wrong to do so. All PACs do that. It is their job. That is their raison d'être. So there was an Irish National Caucus led by this priest called McManus, who was eager to foment conflict in the United Kingdom, to get Irishmen to slaughter each other, who was obviously sectarian, Anglophobic, who was betraying the United States' dearest ally and all the rest of it. So there are other national caucuses, but none of them have this full spectrum media mastery like AIPAC does. So Israel is superb at PR. I know sometimes Israel does get an unfair press, and some criticism of Israel is intemperate and is excessive. So I call that out, and I made another video elsewhere where I've sung my hymn of praise to Israel, saying there are admirable things about Israel. We should give her due in terms of free and fair elections, in terms of gender equality, in terms of not discriminating against gays, a fairly free media, all the rest of it. They don't have the death penalty. They could go further. Even their torture wasn't that severe, and blah, blah, blah. So Israel is by no means the worst in the Middle East. She certainly wins the beauty contest in comparison to her neighbours. So most Middle Eastern countries are decidedly worse on their human rights record. That's true, but they're not illegally occupying other lands, and that's little consolation to the Palestinians who would like to be free. They are not free. They are unfree. They're under illegal occupation. That's oppression by any definition. So the United States funds and arms Israel, gives them diplomatic cover, and provides them with secret information to assist them in their fight. And therefore, the United States bears a very great responsibility for what the Israelis are doing. So yes, that's why it's a highly tendentious topic, and Ilhan Omar is right to say AIPAC is trying to sway US policy and has been crowned with an enormous degree of success for decades over this one. So she was telling the plain truth. And if she's wrong, if donations are nothing to do with politics, all right, AIPAC, stop giving donations. Never give another cent. Politicians never accept another cent which is in any way linked, directly or indirectly, towards policy concerning Israel.